once again. Thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance. And I am Mike Scala, joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist and chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Man, just, it's morning time here. So thinking about, got a couple of things planned out for the day. So, been going through localization recently. So working on creating this app under this contract for this company, and going through putting it into a second language now.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how much text you put into a project, until you have to go through and do it again.
Right.
Like all the buttons, all the menu items, like every little thing that you put in when you're doing the localization, you got to go through and do it again in the separate language.
Because you were doing it a little at a time initially, right? So you didn't realize all the work that was going into it.
Right. So, you get down and you're like, 20 pages deep or something like that. And every little thing has to be translated. Right. So even if it's every item on the menu bar, but then even every button has a text element on it. So even those buttons have to be changed. Even the thing that says print, when you want to go to print, you have to, localize that. So it's like, you just don't realize how much text you put in initially. Because like you said, it's a little at a time, where you're working on one page at a time and you move on and whatnot.
Right. And also, I guess if it's in English, you're not even really putting much thought into the fact that you're doing it sometimes, right? So
right.
It's a bigger thing now when you have to translate it and you start to realize, I put all the stuff down already and I can translate it. It's like, first time around, it's probably more like second nature. Okay, I got to add this. It's not even like registering in your head. This is more work that you're putting into it necessarily.
Yeah. So it's crazy. I'm like, Jesus Christ, there's so much stuff on this page.
Yeah. But did you ever draft something and then lose it for whatever reason? Let's say your internet went out or your computer crashed and you had that moment of freak out, like I got to start from scratch. But then when you go back to it, sometimes it's actually not that difficult because it's still fresh in your head and you're thinking, wow, I could reproduce this entire thing pretty quickly. I'm like a machine, and I didn't think I was able to do that.
Yeah, a couple of times. Yeah, it depends on what it is, but you do get that feeling of like, geez, not again. Like, I got to go through this whole thing again.
Yeah.
So.
And then it's not as bad as you thought it would be somehow.
Sometimes it is.
I don't know. It's happened to me a lot where I would write something and the internet would go down. Maybe I was on my phone or something and, freeze up or whatever. And I would lose my draft and I would just panic. And then I would go back to it. And I'm like, it was basically in my head. So maybe it's like 3 or 4 paragraphs, but it just kind of comes back. It might not be word for word exactly the same, but I'll say like 99% the same without much effort,
Right.
I just wrote it like maybe 5 minutes ago, not even, right? So it's still fresh in my head.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that sucks. So in long things, the key is save often.
Yeah. That's why I like Google Drive, because it automatically saves for you as you go. You have anything very easily on that.
Yeah. It does that. That happens in music too, like mixing a session or recording a session. Like, have you ever had that happen where it just crashes and you're like, Jesus Christ, I got to go back and either do all this.
Your initial thought is, oh man,
it's all gone.
It was the last save point too, right? Because you're working on something and you get lost in it. You can be mixing something for 6 hours and you don't even know what time it is or how long you've been at. So if it crashes, you're like, did I save it 10 minutes ago or 3 hours ago? And that freaks you. Yeah.
Right. And it could even be recording too. Like, I got to re-record this and something. But a lot of times I'm seeing, at least more lately, and I don't know how long it's been, but some of these DAW softwares that have like auto saves, save points. So you come back and you're not too far away from where you're at.
Yeah, no, even the software that I use has a variation of that, where if it crashes and I open it up again, it'll say, do you want to continue where you left off?
Right.
And if you say yes, it's not always exact. It's not always at the moment it crashed, but it's at a save point, like a backup point that it automatically did, usually in a relatively recent passed, right? So maybe I lose the last 10 minutes of what I did, but it's not too catastrophic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what's going on with you?
Well, speaking of catastrophic, have you ever
Oh,
heard of Carvana, the app?
no. I think you mentioned it to me a couple of days ago.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm trying to sell my car, and Carvana was recommended to me. And it seemed like a good idea, right? Where you just enter in all the information on your car and they'll make you an offer immediately.
Is it an
And
offer that you can't refuse?
no, I mean, maybe depending on your circumstance, right? But I don't know. Everyone's experience may vary. My experience, this is the first time that I've tried using it, was they made an offer that was about 1,000, maybe 2,000 below the market value. And so you understand that to a degree, right? It's a business. They're trying to resell the cars. They got to make a profit. And for you, it's just a convenience. It's like a premium that you're paying to not have to go through the hassle of selling it privately. So, depending on if you want to put that work in or if you need that money or whatever your circumstances, maybe it's a good deal for you to take. My issue, though, is the offer expires after a week, I think it is. And so they gave me an offer. I was like, all right, decent, and I'll think about it. I came back to it after it had expired and I put my information back in, and all of a sudden it was $2,000 cheaper than it was initially. I'm like, wow, it dropped $2,000 because they were already about 1,000 or so below market. Now they're like 3,000 plus below market. And now it's getting to be an offer that I don't think I want to take,
Wow, that's a mass drop.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
And so wondering about that, I was like, does that happen to everyone? Are they doing that because they think you're getting desperate? Like you went back to them later because you couldn't sell it privately, so now you'll take even less money. Is that the thing? Or is it just a reflection of the market fluctuating? Because I called the dealership. I was like, maybe you guys can match this or do better. And they're going to look into it. But they asked me what Carvana offered, and I told them the fluctuation, and they were like, wow, the market is crazy right now. So maybe that's just what it is. Maybe it can go back up then. I don't know.
No, that's a big
drop.
difference.
Yeah, for like a week, 2 weeks time for it to drop that much.
You know what this sounds like? It sounds like the criticism that people give over these airline and hotel booking apps, especially the airline booking apps like Travelocity and Expedia and stuff like that. And they say, like, if you go in and say, look for a ticket going from New York to, I don't know, Puerto Rico or whatever, and you go in and the price will be one thing. And then if you go back in like a couple days later, or you go back in shortly thereafter, the price is going to be higher because the system knows that this is what you're looking for now. And so they put the price automatically adjusts to go higher. And so a lot of times what they do is they say people recommend going in and doing your initial search before you're ready to buy in a private browser, so it doesn't put a cookie on your system.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Check this out. When you put your information about your car, you have to put either your license plate or the VIN number of the car. So you can't just put in a similar car, right? The same parameters, but they know exactly that it's your car that you're trying to sell. Which is crazy. I mean, because, if you were trying to be devious, right? You could put in, I don't know why you would do this, but let's say you're trying to screw someone else up. You could put in someone else's VIN number in and then mess up their deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's say you have an ex or you're fighting with your spouse, whatever. Like, I'm going to sell the car. All right, I'm going to make sure you get $2,000 less because I'm going to go in there. If that's how the system works, I don't know. But I thought it was crazy because it seemed like I had put in that first inquiry. You know what I mean? I went back to it a couple of weeks later and now it's $2,000 less all of a sudden. Whoa.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
So
it's a massive drop. Maybe check again in a couple of days. Huh?
No, right. Because the guy at Lexus said the market's crazy right now. So that made me think maybe it just fluctuates. Maybe it'll go back up a little bit. I don't know. We'll have to see. If I eat it. But at the end of the day, about convenience too. Do you really want to deal with trying to sell it privately? Like, I'm just trying to get rid of this car. I'm going away for a while. I just don't want to deal with the hassle right now,
Yeah, I think, again, that part of me would say when you're asking that guy at the dealership and he's like, oh yeah, the market's crazy right now. I think he could be saying that because then they can justify coming back at a price that's slightly better than the $2,000 drop, and look like they come out ahead as the hero.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
it's the market. It's crazy right now. This is a crazy price. We can do a little bit better,
Right.
right? Otherwise, because normally maybe they would have to be $2,000 higher. But like, oh, they're giving this. That's okay. Yeah, we'll give you $10 more. And
Yeah.
so like, come with us.
Well, I did get a letter from the dealership coincidentally today because I called them yesterday. I got a letter, but I think this letter, I just got the same letter a while back. They just keep sending it. But they're saying that they'll give me better than market value for my car if I do a trade-in. So we shouldn't have to bicker about what Carvana is offering. The price point should be what is the market value, right?
Right. Yeah. So, well, maybe that's your option. Trade in.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at that. Like I said, I was just trying to get rid of my car now because I'm going on vacation for a bit and I didn't really want to have to worry about getting a new car before that. So that was my thought process. Maybe Carvana will give me a decent deal. I'll get rid of my car, put more money in my pocket for now. And then when I get back from vacation, I can start looking at new cars. But you do, let's face it, you do save money by doing that trade-in. So maybe it makes sense to do it all at once.
Right.
Well, what doesn't make sense is this Greenpoint serial litterer. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with this. A very odd story that I came across in Gothamist, where it was apparently an NYPD sergeant, but they didn't know who was doing it. And almost every Sunday morning for 4 years, the people who lived on this quiet block in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, would wake up to all kinds of sheets of paper scattered throughout the street. And there's hundreds, thousands of pieces of paper. And this came from old Reader's Digest, Bibles, junk mail, even 1970s pornographic magazines. There were block association meetings about this. Everybody was puzzled as to why are we waking up on a Sunday morning to all this paper being dumped on our block. And apparently sometimes some of the pages would have words underlined and they're trying to figure out the clues. Are they trying to tell us something? Is this some kind of weird fetish? What's happening here? Why is this happening, right? Eventually, the residents of the block performed a series of overnight surveillance operations and were able to discover who it was, evidently. They say it's an NYPD sergeant who lived on the block about 25 years ago, since moved out to Long Island, but apparently was putting pages of these books and publications and mail and all kinds of things in boxes in his car. And every Sunday, almost, would go out there and throw them all over the street. Now,
like not put the box there, like he would just litter it?
Yeah. Someone said it seems like sometimes he would be double-fisted. He would just take paper
just
in each hand,
throwing it everywhere.
Throw them out the window, out the passenger and the driver's side windows. Yeah, just throw them all over the street. Loose paper that he apparently very meticulously removed from these books.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Why? What is this about? I don't think there's an answer to this yet. It's very bizarre. Now, apparently, it was never enough at once to constitute a crime, right? It wasn't illegal dumping because there wasn't enough of it at once. So you knew that. And they never caught him in the act. At least the police never caught him in the act, or sanitation never caught him in the act. So he wasn't able to get ticketed for it, right? Apparently, all that happened thus far is he was punished by the NYPD, if you want to call it that. They took away one vacation day from him, right? But that's it. Nothing else happened. And so it's just a very bizarre story. Why is this happening? And what is this about? Again, it's the block where he lived, right? His family had a house.
Yeah, but that was like 20 years ago.
25 years ago, yeah. And now apparently, and it stops since they figured out who it is, allegedly, it stopped, right? But up until recently, it was going on almost every Sunday, they said, for like 4 years. All this paper being dumped on the block. They called him the book bandit.
It stopped on that block. Maybe he's gone somewhere else now.
Maybe.
Like what?
Houses.
I mean, they haven't questioned him. The police haven't questioned him or anything.
They might have. The reporter apparently got a hold of him, but he hung up the phone. So
wow,
they don't have a lot of information yet as to what's going on with this.
Well, I think we could also potentially have found a solution to how you can get rid of your car.
How?
It's obviously a good dumping spot. So just take your car there and just leave
Dump
it
it.
on. Yeah, just leave it and bounce.
I'm sure they'd rather get a Lexus than pages from a 1970 pornos mag.
I don't know. Depends on how much you like Bush. So my question is,
that was Carter. No, I'm just kidding.
my question is, where does he get all of these pages? Where is it? Says hundreds of pages. Like, is he just got like a storehouse of all of this stuff?
Apparently, it's all of his old books, and they said it's just all kinds of stuff: junk mail, Reader's Digest, Bibles, it's whatever he had. Yeah, like I don't know why. Is he just trying to get rid of it all? But what an odd way to do it, and go to the same block every time. That was your family's old house. Very strange.
Very. I mean, yeah, very strange indeed. And it's not like he was putting it out for it to be picked up by trash.
Right.
Like he was just spreading it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
there's a video of it. He was caught in the act. I don't know if we can play the video on here or not.
Oh, we'll look at it. We'll have to look it up later. So you said it's Greenfield?
Greenpoint.
Greenpoint. Yeah, we'll have to look it up on the internet later. But that's crazy.
I can do a share screen, can I?
It won't play very well.
Oh, it won't. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I can do a link and put it in the chat or something.
Yeah.
Video. It's surveillance footage. You can see it's on papers out the window.
Christ. The whole, the whole world's gone crazy. You know, that makes me I don't know. That kind of makes me question his ability to perform as a sergeant.
Right, but they said he was at the auto impound, I think. They said basically he was working a job where they put police officers who were not in good standing with the department. They probably knew something was up with this guy. I mean, it's sad, obviously we don't know what was going on, but upon first blush, this sounds like someone who was a little mentally disturbed.
Right. So, upon first blush, I never heard that term before.
No,
like you were getting at me last week about some of the terms I was using. Now, what is upon first blush?
Have you heard of on first blush?
No, what is that about?
Really?
Never heard that before.
Now I feel like I'm being gaslighted. I didn't just make that up, did I?
I've never heard.
That's a thing.
I've never heard that before.
First impression of a situation, on first blush, this is my impression of it. You never heard that before? Is that a New York thing?
No, I'm looking it up. It's in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. But it says at first blush. It means at the first glimpse or impression.
Right.
Which I gathered that from the way you used it, but I've never heard that before.
Wow.
For example, at first blush, we thought it was an elegant restaurant, but it soon became obvious that it was hardly the place for a special occasion.
That is a good question, though, if you think about it. Why are you blushing? Because that insinuates you're blushing more than once, right? Like the first time you blushed, you thought it was this, but then you blushed twice and you realized it wasn't. Why is blushing more than once somehow revealing of a certain situation?
Unless it's a different definition of blush, a different usage of blush. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a verb usage of blush, a different verb usage.
Upon first blush, I think blush is a noun there, isn't it?
But I mean, like as far as the meaning of it, but I don't see anything else. It's still talking about the same meaning. I don't know where that comes from. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say maybe it comes from like brush and it got conflated somehow. Brushing the painting becomes more clear, right? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's makeup.
Look at that. Even James and Jennifer in the chat both said they've never heard of it before.
Get out of here. You never heard that expression before?
Nope. Never heard that before. Oh, you probably heard that somewhere. We do that. We pick up phrases, right? We hear something somewhere and then we understand the meaning of it. Maybe we've heard it more than once. And then it just becomes part of, it seems to fit the moment when we speak, even if it's
come on. I've been saying that my whole life and hearing it my whole life. It's not a rare thing.
Really? I've never heard you say that.
You never heard anyone say first blush before?
Never. I'm not alone here with this.
That should be the whole question of the week. Have you heard this expression before?
Right? Interesting.
Well, one thing that I did find interesting in this article was once the residents found out that this was a police officer, they didn't really want to talk about it anymore. And they were afraid that they would come off as anti-cop, or some seemed like they were afraid that the police would go after them. They said, the police have a lot of power. We don't want to talk. I mean, I don't know. I've encountered this attitude from people before also. And it's a little puzzling to me. I think we should be able to talk about issues. I mean, if this guy did something that was wild and crazy and wrong, right? Like, because he's a cop, I mean, like you said, people in those positions should actually have more accountability. Why would we shy away from being critical of it? And why do we think that that means that we're inherently anti-cop to talk about one person's bad behavior or more than one person's bad behavior?
Right. I think some of that's also indicative of this. I don't know if I'd say culture war, but this war that has it where we have to exalt cops to this certain level, or you're completely anti-cop, or you're completely one side or the other side. It just, it just doesn't make sense.
It's very counterproductive, right? You can't get to a good space by doing that, a good solution to an issue. You're basically refusing to take on the issue by doing that. Right.
And we should want our police officers to be held to the highest regard. We should want them to have the best of the best on the streets. And that means not only in your skills and in the way you conduct yourself, but even in your behavior. Like, we should all want that. We shouldn't want Biff from Back to the Future with a badge. Like,
right.
We should.
Right. Yeah. I think we need to get away from that cops and robbers mentality where it's like very black and white, right? Very polarized, right? It's just kind of, it's either this or that. Like, no, these are nuanced conversations that we need to be having about.
Right. And it's all rhetoric that suits whatever the conversation is at the moment. Like, because we've seen, like, so I mean, generally it's like conservatives are like supposed to be super pro cop, and then liberals are the ones who are supposedly against cops. But we've seen in actions and laws and proposals and things where their conservatives don't follow that super pro cop mentality or that rhetoric that they put out, because it doesn't fit whatever that is at the moment. And then some liberals are very pro cop, even though it sounds like they want to get rid of them. It's like, so it's kind of disingenuous sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, January 6th was mostly conservatives who were attacking cops physically, right? I mean, they were the ones actually directing violence towards police officers.
Perfect example, perfect example. If it was all that you were so, Blue Lives Matter, you should really be downing the people on January 6th for doing that. But that wasn't, it's rhetoric.
Yeah. And again, I think it's just very counterproductive, right? If we're trying to have honest conversations about these issues, we should be able to speak about them freely without being labeled like, oh, you hate cops. That's just childish. It's so immature. Right. They wouldn't, and I don't want to pick on these people in this particular article from this block or whatever, but it's just an attitude that I encounter enough to where it's just, I don't get it. I don't relate to it. It's like, why are you so afraid to speak on this issue now upon learning that he was a cop? So what?
Right. And to be fair, there has been cases where there is police officers do retaliate against people who speak against them. So that could be one case. We've seen that with what was the Eric Gardner case, when the guy filmed the officer choking out that guy to death. And then he was constantly harassed by the police. All he did was be the one that filmed it.
Right.
And we've seen multiple cases like that. So, that's one issue. And it could be people in that area are related to cops. And so then they're more reluctant to do that as well.
Well, I think some of the people in this story were involved with the local block association. And I think they usually have the precinct come down and give reports on what's going on in the area. So they're probably close personally with some of those police officers there.
Yeah.
And maybe they looked at it like they would be insulting their friends or something, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, and ultimately it should be the police coming down to the block association and apologizing for the behavior of this police officer instead of the block association being afraid to speak on it.
Yeah, it just shouldn't be, you know?
Right.
We should be able to have these conversations. And I think showing a willingness to engage in that type of discussion and even criticism when warranted shows that you're really pro-cop, if anything, because you're trying to come to a better place. You're trying to get the police department to a better position, you know, for the sake of everybody. So that's not anti-cop. That's being pro-cop, being pro-people, being pro-good citizen, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and we've talked about it before. You know, they're not holding cops accountable, not holding police accountable. Not only is dangerous for it, but there are police within the departments that would like some of this stuff cleaned up and feel pressure to keep quiet as well. And so, you know, speaking out about it, holding people accountable, this helps everybody. It helps the so-called good cops inside there as well. Like, so.
Yeah, more discussion is a good thing. More speech is good.
Yeah.
And I guess that leads us to our topic that we wanted to bring up about Arkansas, was it? And the ACLU is now going after them for this law concerning parental controls on social media and age verification for everyone, just to make sure that you're not a kid, right?
Right. So, yeah. So there's the ACLU, the nationwide ACLU, just filed a proposed amicus brief. Amicus brief. So you have to explain what that is.
It's friend. It's Latin. It means friend. So it's friend of the court. That means that you're not directly a party to a lawsuit, but you're filing to give your opinion, to try to influence the court to rule in a certain way. So it's like you're a friend of the court, they call it.
Okay. So they filed one of those briefs supporting a challenge to an Arkansas law that would require all users, including adults, to verify their ages before using social media. And it would also require young people to get parental approval before accessing their accounts. Now, courts have repeatedly struck down similar types of age verification types of laws in the past, opposing, age verification and parental consent requirements on access to protected speech, including media like video games and websites. So they're saying their position is it's an unconstitutional and it's a threat to our privacy to limit free speech in such a broad way. Right.
They're saying it's an unconstitutional restriction on free speech because the government is basically, if not prohibiting, highly restricting people's access to the internet. And social media is so ubiquitous. We've talked about this. It really is like basically saying you can't access all the information that everyone else has access to.
Right. Absolutely. So, that does bring up an issue. It brings up a big problem. If people can't access internet, and it's different than if it's like, okay, Facebook says that young people under the age of 13 can't access it, or that's the law that says that, but so Facebook says people under the age of 18 can't access it without parental approval. It's very different than the government saying that.
It's the government versus a private actor, and we've talked about free speech constitutionally applies against the government, right? The government come in and restrict that unless they meet strict scrutiny, right? Like we talked about with the affirmative action case. It's a little bit of a different constitutional framework there. That was equal protection, 14th Amendment. This is free speech, First Amendment. Although, if you want to be very technical, it actually is also a 14th Amendment case because you're talking about the state doing it, right? The First Amendment talks about Congress. So that's the federal government. The 14th Amendment is the one that's held against the states. And so those fundamental rights that are in amendments such as the First Amendment, like free speech, are held against the states via the 14th Amendment. So it is the same actual amendment that was at play in that affirmative action case, although again, a little bit different because we're talking about free speech here, not equal protection. So that was about discrimination, right? This is about free speech. But constitutionally, a similar type of analysis would apply where any restrictions on speech would have to overcome strict scrutiny. So the government would have to have a very compelling reason for why they're doing it. And they would have to be achieving this compelling reason via the least restrictive means. They call that narrow tailoring. So the question to ask is, why is Arkansas doing this? Are they doing it in the least restrictive way possible?
And I think it becomes even more of a harder bar to reach when then adults are included. Like if it was just for young people, I think they could probably make a better argument saying, well, this is for the safety of the children. We've seen all these studies about how detrimental social media is for their social development and mental well-being and health. But this is also adults can't access it without.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the age verification just to make sure that you are an adult? Like if you show that you're over 18, then can't you just use it?
Right. This is to require all users, including adults, to verify their ages before using social media, and would require young people to get parental approval before accessing their.
Right. But I'm saying, isn't the age verification for adults just to make sure that you're not a kid? So if you show that you're not a kid, then you're done. You can use it, right?
It would seem so, yeah.
But the point is still valid that you're still burdening the adult, right? Because the adult now has to be able to prove that, right?
Right. And my thing would be like, if it was just, say, you know, a bill that said the kids had to get parental approval, then they can go with the argument that this is for the safety of the children. We're trying to protect the children, this and that. Right.
But I'm saying is, I'm sure what they're going to say is that they do the age verification to prove that you're not a kid. True. Otherwise, a kid can just use it and say, I'm an adult. Like, how do they know that that's not a kid?
Right. True. Yeah. So
it does sweep adults into it. So even if an adult were just going on a business trying to get on the internet, we would now have this extra barrier that we didn't have before. And the question is, does the government have a compelling reason to do that? And are they achieving that through the least restrictive means possible? I don't know. It does seem pretty much of a stretch. But the question also then is, what exactly are they doing to make you prove it? I mean, you have to.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. What do you have to do to prove it? And who's going to be verifying it? So I see a lot of cases.
How long does it take? Is it automatically verified? Does someone sit in an office going through all these licenses that get scanned? Like, how does it work? And then what happens to that information? Do they keep your license on file now?
Right. And see, that's even more of a problem, I think. So what happens in a lot of cases when they're doing age verification, at least I've seen a lot in the last few years, is where basically on your smartphone you'd scan the front and the back of your ID and submit that through the app. And then that either goes to a third-party verification system that checks it and then gives you approval or whatnot, or it goes to someone in a live setting who can look at it and say, maybe the algorithm says, okay, this is fine, or it says, okay, maybe this needs to be checked by a human. Then a human takes a look at it. But then again, that brings up who's holding on to this information, and do you want these third parties and this and whatnot to be holding on to your data like that, your ID?
How long does it take with today's technology? Is it easier to instantly verify someone's age? Are there other things that you could do that wouldn't take long? Let's say this took a human intervening and, you try and get online. It could be urgent, but if you really need to get information online, and again, I guess they're saying this is just social media, it's not all the internet, right? But for whatever reason, so you had to get on social media for something urgently. I mean, it's certainly plausible that nowadays you would need to, for whatever reason, but you can't. What if it takes you a day to be verified, 2 days, a week, a long time?
Right.
What kind of damage could that actually do to someone, man? In today's world, it could be significant, I think.
Right. So it's very problematic, I think, to start introducing this type of legislation. And hopefully this gets, in my opinion, I hope this gets beaten down.
Don't forget, a lot of public officials nowadays communicate almost exclusively through social media. So if you don't have access to it, you could be missing out on updates from your elected officials on what's happening in the community. That's the police department oftentimes uses that, right? I mean, you might not know what's happening locally with the police or with crime or suspects on the run, whatever it is. I mean, it could be vital information that the government is restricting you from, and that can become problematic.
Right. And ACLU brought that up in their message, their not tweet. This was a thread that I read it on. It said that people of all ages rely on social media for news alerts, political discussions, artistic expression, and more. As written, the law threatens our freedom access to that. We deserve better than legislation that prioritizes control and surveillance over our constitutional rights. So they brought up that same idea.
Right. And I really would like to know what the verification is. Maybe we can find that out. What are they asking you to do? I mean, is it as simple as just entering your birthday? That's not really typing anything. That's just telling you type in a birthday. Anyone could do that. But how checked is this? Because the question would become, is that the least burdensome way of achieving it? Now, of course, if it's just a sham, right? If it was enter your birthday, or let's say it was even simpler than that. Let's say it was, do you promise you're over 18? Yes or no? You can say, oh, sure, that's the easiest way to do it. But then you're not really doing it, right? That's not, at a certain point, you could argue that it's not really verifying it. And so you actually aren't meeting that compelling interest, assuming that there is a compelling interest in the first place, right? So
that's how it's been. That's how it's been thus far, right? Like in any sort of age verification, it's like, oh, are you 18 or over? Like if you go to the Budweiser site, like you can't access it. You're not supposed to be able to access it. And
if you say you're under, they send you to the Disney website usually.
There's something like that, right? And so, but it's really on the person to be truthful, which to me personally, I think that's fine.
Is that really age verification? And if you can establish as the government, as a state, that you have a compelling interest in keeping children off social media without parental consent, right? Let's say you can prove that part of the problem for whatever reason. You're able to get past that. Are you meeting that compelling interest by just asking the child, are you over 18?
Right. Well, this is, for those interested in looking up, this is Arkansas Act 689, also known as Social Media Safety Act, is what they're calling it. This was signed by Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Signed into law on April 2023. If it allowed to go into effect, the law would require users to provide personal information such as driver's license or photo ID to companies or applications that purport to be able to verify their ages.
Okay, so there you go. So let's do it like this. I'm the lawyer. You're the expert witness. I'm putting you on the stand and I'm asking you what is being done to verify people's ages. And you're telling me that the state is requiring driver's licenses and other information to be provided. My question to you would be, are there any less burdensome ways of verifying someone's age than that?
And I would say we don't need to verify people's age.
No, but that's not the question. I'm asking you if there are less burdensome ways to verify someone's age.
A less burdensome way to verify someone's age?
Or at least less restrictive way.
I mean, am I in support?
Verify their age.
Am I in support of it? Is that the position I'm supposed to be taking?
No, you're my witness, so you're probably against the state. If I'm calling you as the witness,
I don't think we need to verify ages.
But that's not the question. I'm asking you. Let's assume that we have to, and the way the state is doing it. Is there a way to do it that's less burdensome than that? Because we're trying to defeat that prong of the test. We've already argued the other prong. We have our own arguments for that. But let's just put that aside for now and say, even assuming that is a compelling interest, is that the least restrictive way of meeting that interest? Is there any other way to do it that's less burdensome on the user?
That's less burdensome on the user?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What is that?
You could just ask for age verification like it's been done for the past 30 years. That's less burdensome on the user. They just put in a birth date.
But is that truly verifying their age? Do you think that actually constitutes age verification?
That's what has been age verification for the past 30 years. So, I mean, whether it's as effective as actually seeing a license, no, it probably isn't. But yes, for a less burdensome way for it to, for the user to put in their verification. Is it full verification? Probably not, but
Mm.
I think we've been going through the motions in that regard, and I think we're seeing that it's not really that necessary. Some of that should fall to, if your concern is that it is the children are getting a hold of these websites, I think it's less on the state and more on the parents, on the home, to do that. I mean, websites can put up, say, hey, we've got an age verification here. You put in a birth date. Sure, a child can put in any age, and even adults put in any age. It's because they don't want to put in their real age and give people information.
If the state has a compelling interest, for argument's sake, in verifying someone's age before using social media, are they even meeting that interest by just asking someone what their birthday is? Is that really solving the issue?
No, but my question is there an issue? I think that's like we're arguing.
Question, no, I agree with that. I agree that that's a valid question, but I'm just trying to figure out if this method of asking for a driver's license would be constitutionally permissible, assuming that the state has a compelling interest in the first place. So that's a separate question.
I know, I get that, but I think that even just going down that route is putting the ball in the other court when it shouldn't be. Like, it shouldn't even be. We shouldn't even be talking at that point. But the state has no reason to be asking that question.
The two-prong test, basically, and it fails at the first prong, so you don't need to get to the second prong.
That's
it's not a compelling interest.
That's what I think.
I think you might be right on that. I'm just trying to think if that's the way to do it.
If they could prove that there wasn't a compelling interest.
Let's say that the court agrees that there is a compelling interest in verifying a child's age before getting on social media. Let's say they agree.
Remember, this is not just the child. The adults are roped into this too.
Sure, they're roped into it too, but the compelling interest would be to protect children, right?
Well, I don't know if that's what their reasoning is behind it, but we could probably assume that that's how they're going to argue it. Let's see.
I'm gonna pull up the actual text of this bill here. I think I got
here. I can send you the article that came through.
No. It's got to be on here somewhere. Bill number.
Lawmakers are claiming the legislation is aimed at giving parents more control over their kids' social media usage and protecting teens from the harm social media may impose on young adults and mental health.
Right.
They're saying this law not only fails to protect children, it also unfairly burdens users who care about anonymity, privacy, and security online and may put users' personal data at risk. And I think that is a big point that needs to be, reiterated over and over again. So and
it's really first in its kind, right? We've never seen any other state do something like this. Okay.
No, we have not. Now, there are some sites that require verification, but not for just general social media, right? So, for example, what was it? I think I did something, earlier this year, I did something with Social Security information. I think I had to update it, something or whatever. But to get onto the website to be able to do it, you have to go through this, I think it's gov.id or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so you have to provide your ID verification to access this stuff. But this is also deep.
Here we go.
It's not just general social media.
I was just reading through the text of the actual legislation here about what age verification is. And they say that broadly, the social media company shall use a third-party vendor to perform reasonable age verification. But then it goes into specifics. It says reasonable age verification methods include providing, and it's got three choices here. One, a digitized identification card, including a digital copy of a driver's license, or government-issued ID, or any commercially reasonable age verification method. Okay, so that's the catch-all. Any commercially reasonable age verification method. So I believe that this is going to come down to what those methods are, and are they using the least restrictive means? Because it seems to me that having to provide your actual ID is much more burdensome than some of the other methods that might be out there.
And not only burdensome, it's I see a privacy issue. I see
Sure.
a safety issue.
I'm
And
just
yeah,
speaking on the constitutional analysis of the
right,
restriction of free speech, right? Of course, there are
right,
other issues beyond that too.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think ID verification is kind of what we see as a standard in a lot of things. Like you want to buy alcohol, you show ID. You go into a club, you show ID, and so maybe that's what people are feeling like that's the standard way to do it or the best way
Right.
to verify it.
But hold on a second. Buying alcohol and going to a club, those are much different activities than speaking.
No, I
Accessing
agree.
speech rights, right?
I
Now
agree. I'm just saying,
imagine, right? Imagine the government says you have to show me ID before you speak, which is what they're doing here, essentially.
right. I agree. I'm just saying that maybe that's where they're coming from when saying using ID to verify is because that's how we verify
And
identification.
right. What would be an interesting part of this case also? They may have to bring in experts, maybe child psychologists or people with expertise in children's behavior to ask them if simply asking a child what year they were born or asking a child their age is effective or if that reasonably verifies an age. How would most children respond to that? If a child is trying to get on social media, I'm sure it depends on their age, right? Let's say it's well, I don't know. I'm not an expert in the field, but if it's a 4-year-old trying to get on Facebook and it says, "How old are you, son? How old are you, little kid?" Are they going to answer truthfully, or are they going to say, "I was born in 1800"? What are they going to say?
A 4-year-old, yeah, 4-year-old is not going to be like, but
At a certain point, probably
junior high school student, 5th grade, 6th grade,
right.
something like that, they're going to lie. They're going to, I mean, listen, even as adults, oftentimes we don't put in our ages. How many friends do you have on Facebook now when their birthday comes up and says they're 100 years old, right?
What?
Like,
I've never seen that. 100 years old?
you've never seen that? You see how you got your friends list, like, oh, these friends have birthdays coming up today or birthdays today, and it lists the age. Like, this person's going to be 30, this person's going to be 45, this person's going to be 100, and they're not 100, but it's because they put in a false birthday because they don't want to put their information.
No,
yeah.
I did see. I don't know if it was Tinder, one of the dating apps. People were talking about that, where if you pull your profile in from Facebook, it
Right.
pulls your birthday in from that as well. And then some people said that they lied on their Facebook profile when they first created it, but they did that because they had to be, I don't know if it's still like that. I think back in the day, you had to be of a certain age to get on Facebook. And so they lied about their age when they made their Facebook profile to appear older than they were so that they could access it. And now on their dating profile, it shows them as being older than they actually are.
Yeah, no, I think people do it for a variety of reasons, right? For either just because it's privacy. They don't want this company knowing their age. It's none of their business, really. Or maybe it's, just a default. Just they don't want to, people will put in January 1st, what was it? January 1st, 1900 as the birth date, just because it's something a round number. Like
Right.
There's all kinds of reasons why.
And yeah.
And then anonymity, privacy,
Right.
all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But so there you go. If we're going to say that most children under 18, especially when they reach a certain age, are just going to lie, then I think there's an argument that you're not truly doing reasonable age verification by just asking them their birthday. Maybe you need to do something more to meet that compelling interest. But I think there's a very strong argument in the idea that you're burdening even adults by making them show their license. And so if the compelling interest is to protect children, are you meeting that compelling interest by the least restrictive means in sweeping adults into it and burdening them as well? Because now you're putting a restriction on everyone, right? You're certainly inconveniencing them and maybe more.
And the burden, if there needs to be a burden here, if you're concerned about children accessing social media or certain sites on the internet, that should fall to the parents, right? That's the most logical, the most responsible way of doing it. The state shouldn't be doing it. The government shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't put that burden or the whole responsibility shouldn't be on the social media company. As parents are the ones who should be utilizing the tools that they have. Either, look, if you don't want your kid to be on these certain websites, put the computer in the living room. So they can't be on porn if they're sitting next to grandma watching, her Gunsmoke shows.
And that is right. That's an argument for the first prong of the test not being met, right? That's the argument for the state not having a compelling interest in even trying to do this.
Right.
And I think
every
it does
device
come off as excessively puritanical, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is the state even trying to monitor this at all? Why is it? It's funny because we just talked about how you have these labels where people try to say, oh, conservatives like this, progressives like this. But you usually hear conservatives say that they are in favor of smaller government and government being not in your business. But here's an example of them, I think, putting way too much into someone's business.
Every device, and not only every device, but every social media platform has parental controls. As a parent, you can say, people have the internet in their pocket. Your kid could be out, they could be Googling Pornhub, or they could be on Pornhub, in the park somewhere, and you wouldn't know. But if you're the one buying that device, if you're the one that has control, you're the parent, you have controls on that device that you can stop it from going to certain places. You can, and you can make it so the children can't change those settings. So you got control of the device if you choose to use them. Same with their iPads, same with their computers. And then each one of these social media accounts have parental controls in them as well. So you could tell your child, okay, pull up your Facebook profile. I need to set parental controls. Now, of course, kids are getting around that by doing they have their account that their parents know about, and then they have the account that their parents don't know about. Right. But then again, you put the controls on device and they can't get around that. So parents have to start using the tools that are available and take that responsibility instead of, leaving it up to the government or the social media companies to do it.
It does say here, just for the record, in this legislation, it says if a social media company performs a reasonable age verification, it shall not retain any identifying information of the individual after access to the platform has been granted. So at least that's in there. It doesn't mean that that's going to be always enforced or practiced, but they did at least have the mind to put that in the bill.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's too much control. It's too invasive. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
All of that.
Why don't we make that the poll of the week?
Sounds good to me. Thank you, PJ. I see PJ in the chat.
What's going on, PJ?
Jennifer Ann says, my 10-year-old does not even know the year he was born.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, right? Because we as adults think it sounds silly to ask someone the year of their birth as age verification because we're like, oh, they'll just lie. But if you're a kid, maybe you won't even know how to successfully lie to pass that question, right? Because you think an old person was born so long ago, you're not going to know what year to put in there. I was born in 1775, like my mom. You don't know.
Right. Yeah. See, Jennifer also brought up in the chat, same point I made, that you can put a parental lock on the device already. Like, the tools are there. The tools are there. Here, she's got a really good comment. This is what I'm talking about. She's like, yes, it's up to the parents. You can even control how much time they can have access on the internet and when rules of the phone shuts down. She set up all the parental controls on every single device, even the PS4. Like, the tools are there. The companies have made the effort. This is an overreach, in my opinion. This is an overreach by conservatives, for one, and maybe just some outrage from parents who just aren't handling their business. Right. If there is parental outrage that prompted this, I don't know. It could just be to get in their business.
But there's a great irony here because you saw a couple of years ago, the number one issue in elections statewide was parent choice. When it came to schools, when it came to the curriculum, they said that the state should not be in the business of setting the educational agenda for their children, that the parents should all get together and decide what should be taught to their kids, right? And that was a conservative viewpoint. I mean, I remember the election in Virginia was contested largely on that issue. And that's how the governor there won. What was his name? Youngkin, I think his name is, right? He won mainly on that issue, polls showed after the election. And if that's the view that parents should have more control, this would seem to be the opposite of that. This is saying that we can't trust parents with controlling what their child does on social media, at least. And we need the government to step in and restrict it, monitor it. I mean, that's the opposite of what they're saying should happen at schools. So why is it that your school, when it comes to your child's education, it should be up to the parents only, but when it comes to their social media activity, it's the government's job.
Yeah. And look, this isn't even new, having these parental controls. There have been parental controls since the days of AOL. Like, these tools have always been available. Remember Net Nanny and those things that were, I guess they used to ship with the CDs or have the advertisements for things like Net Nanny that would do the same.
Yeah.
Now it's built into every device that you've got. It's built into your operating systems. It's built into every social media platform. You can go in there and explore these types of things, and they're very extensive. They give you a lot of control over things. It's just, it's foolish that people trying to either pass it off to the government to do or put it on the responsibility of the companies, social media companies, when they've already taken the steps, instead of doing it themselves. So.
Right. And that would be part of the legal argument in terms of, does the government have a compelling interest to step in? We'd have to ask, why does the government think it needs to be in this arena at all? Why are the parents incapable of doing this?
Why are you all up in their business?
So the poll question of the week is, should age verification and parental consent be required to access social media?
Right. I wonder if we should add ID age verification in there.
Well, it's not necessarily ID. If you look at the language of this legislation, that was one of the three choices it gave the social media companies. It did have that catch-all of a reasonable, commercially available verification system.
Right. But
what are those other systems, and are they less burdensome than the ID?
Right. Some of those would also require IDs, though.
Some of them. And the question would be, is the simple asking you your age, is that considered a reasonable, commercially available verification system? It might be.
To me, I think it's fine. But I think they're getting too much into people's business. Ulterior motives. I think this, and I can't think of what it was, but if I remember right, in past couple of years, there have been some conservative, either government or politicians that wanted to get these types of records of the users.
I think I know what you're talking about. For people who wanted to get licensed to buy a gun. No, I
don't think it was a gun. It was people that were criticizing Trump. People that were criticizing Trump or the government, and so some of these conservative entities were looking to get user identification information, and people were calling this is not only is it very dangerous because this could lead to some sort of retaliation, but it was a far overreach. It never went through, but this was a talk for a hot minute. But this to me is one way that can happen, because now they do this verification. Who's to say that now the government doesn't have access to those records, right? That means the government's got not only your name and ID stuff, which they already have, but they've got a definitive connection to what social media account you're using.
Right.
Your username.
That's a little bit scary, right? Because we always feel like we have a little bit of autonomy in a sense that, sure, there's the DMV, and you can say the government knows who I am, and that's all well and good. But when we're on social media, we like to think of it as not entirely anonymous, depending on the site, but it's at least in our control, right? The idea that it's tied to our ID through the government is a little bit scary. right? It just means that, I don't know. It's indicative of more surveillance, or the ability to have more surveillance and just be all up in your privacy. And yeah, it just raises those types of concerns, like, get on my business.
Absolutely. And I think that's a greater issue. Now, I'm not saying that this is what this bill is doing, right, but it can open the doorway for that, because someone's going to be holding those records.
And to be fair, the legislation does demand that they don't keep the records, but you don't know if you can always trust that.
Right. We've seen that's not the case. In other situations where the companies are supposed to delete the information, they've been found to hold on to it. Like, for example, I think it was, and this is a little bit different. This was Snapchat, and Snapchat's whole thing was that it was disappearing messages. But then they found that Snapchat was saving these messages.
Yeah.
And so, like, that was a real violation. So it's happened before. And then let's look at the leaks. How many data leaks do we have per year that are massive scales of people's personal information that's supposed to be in the most secure systems, and they're still getting leaked or hacked? So to try to keep using these systems,
right, and that's what it is. Also, you can say they've got to get rid of the records, but first of all, are they even that computer savvy? The people who work in these government agencies, maybe they're deleting them or they're putting them in a recycle bin, right? But the backups are still there. They're still accessible. They're still in the computer. They're still in the hard drive somewhere.
Right. I mean, well, if you go that route, like, once you delete something on your computer, it's not completely gone. It can be recovered because it sits there until that space is
overwritten. It's right. So it's overwritten. Right.
So if you've never
fill up the computer that you can overwrite this data, but you don't know when it's going to be gone, if ever.
Right. So that can be pulled back up. Yeah. So that's an issue. But even if we take, we say maybe the user's not savvy enough, or these agencies aren't savvy enough, but we're seeing people like Apple or these massive companies that are savvy enough still getting hacked, still getting data taken from them. So it's not even a matter of necessarily of being savvy enough. It's a matter of when it's going to happen, because there's a constant push to try to get this type of data. And so that's one of my big issues with the cloud and storing everything in the cloud, because then it makes all this personal private stuff accessible and a target of being hacked and taken. Because we see government stuff gets hacked.
Right.
So it's like, I think
and when we think of government, sometimes people think of the government as like this mythical entity in the sky that's all powerful and omnipotent, and but right. But it's really not. And this is coming from someone who's worked within government. They hire regular people to do these jobs, and you're not going to assume that they're all tech savvy. You think this person in Arkansas who's hired to verify someone's ID, let's say, you think they're going to be the most tech savvy person in the world? I can almost guarantee you that they're not, right? So it is very susceptible to being hacked, right? Let's say they think they're following instructions. Yeah, I put it in the recycle bin every day. Maybe you didn't get everything. Maybe, maybe it's backed up somewhere. Maybe it's in temp files, and you're not clicking the catch and the cookies and everything properly, right? Like it is very easily manipulated. Like you said, even if you do the right thing and delete it, it's still technically on your computer until it's overwritten by something else. It does raise security concerns.
Absolutely.
I worked for the state of Georgia. I think I mentioned it a while ago. I was helping them administer COVID rent relief funds. Part of what we had to do was look at people's information to see if they qualified for this money. You did have private information, and we were supposed to take precautions to obviously dispose of it once it was used. But you have all these people, now you're talking about lawyers who are maybe good at law, but they're probably not going to be the most tech savvy either. With the more people that you've got doing it, the more prone to error you're going to be. And somewhere along the way, someone is not going to do everything properly, and there's going to be information that's easily hacked or on a computer somewhere where it shouldn't be.
Absolutely. So yeah. So hopefully they can beat this down, but it does sound like it's a little bit of a lost cause, because she signed it into law. So,
well, that's why you have the court case, right? You have to challenge it constitutionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a very interesting case. It's one that I would love to work on myself. This is the type of law I like to do.
Yeah.
So, we'll see what kind of responses we get on the poll.
Yeah, let's see where that goes. Hopefully.
Is that the government's job?
You know, I predict
Uh-oh.
I predict people are going to say that they shouldn't have the ID verification.
That they should not have it. Because they're on social media already, and they don't want it to be harder to be on social media.
Well, because it's also government interfering. It's a government getting in your business. And I think there are going to be more people opposed to that.
So that's like the more libertarian side than the more puritanical.
I think even the conservatives, if you put it to
that's what I mean. But you can split it into more libertarian leaning, like get out my business types, or types, or the, we need to look out for the children. Because I think you're seeing this probably come from not the libertarian wing, certainly, right? You're seeing this come from more the Christian way. I would think that's where it would be coming from, right? Like that type of conservatism. Like,
right, yeah.
Watch all these kids by any means.
But I think there would probably be a good sizable group of conservatives who would look at it and be like, this is an overreach. I think there is common ground here, or potential for common ground against something like this across conservatives, liberals, libertarians, progressives, because of that government intrusion into your business.
And fundamentally, the word liberal really means free, right? Freedom. Right. So, this does seem to be a violation of your freedom. And yeah, you would think no matter what your political philosophy is, it does seem like it's going far.
Yeah.
So we will see. And of course, we're a New York based show primarily, right? This is in Arkansas also. People of Arkansas might feel differently about it than we do. Yeah.
But if it happens there, conservatives will probably introduce similar laws in different states, and now we've got a nationwide spread.
Yeah, it could happen. It could happen, but again,
how crazy is it going to be? People are going to have to start using fake IDs to use their Instagram account
to go online to But again, this is why we have the courts, and hopefully the judges will do the right thing and apply the correct standard of constitutional scrutiny, right? And if you are using a strict scrutiny standard, as should be applied when you're talking about restrictions on free speech, which is a fundamental right, then the burden should be on the government to make its case. It's presumptively unconstitutional unless they can overcome those hurdles that we talked about. And so it shouldn't be on the people challenging the law. So that if you can identify that your free speech rights are being restricted here, now the government has to show why it did what it did and have damn good reason, right? And do so with the least restrictive means. So
right.
Arkansas should have the burden of making out its case and proving the constitutionality of this law.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. We'll see.
Yeah, we shall see. And as always, we thank you all for joining us. What is the bottom line, Jay?
The bottom line is that I think we should, it might sound a little bit more conservative, but the government should get out of people's business as much.
Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn.
Yeah, we should stop trying to have other entities police things that we should be taking care of ourselves, right? If you're worried about your children and there are things online, utilize the tools that are available. There are tons of them at the device level, at the website level, the application level. There are tons of those things. If you're worried about them going to general websites, there are things that you can do. You can put your computer, your family computer, in the front room. You can make sure they don't have a private computer, or put the controls on those things. I think governments should stop trying to look to controlling people in their personal lives, especially when the tools are out there for them to take that responsibility to what's acceptable to them in their own personal lives. So get out of each other's business in that regard. So that's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line. I like it. And as always, people can find us everywhere on social media without ID, unless you're in Arkansas, I guess. You can find us on YouTube at Nuance Show. We post the replays there as well as clips throughout the week. So check that out. I believe we're over 70,000 views now on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. It'll be nice to hit that 100,000 milestone at some point soon. We are, of course, on Instagram at Nuance Show. And if you like podcasts, wherever podcasts are available, you can get the show pushed directly to your device. So subscribe at Spotify, Apple, wherever else you get your podcasts.
Make sure your parents have controls to allow the podcast to come through.
That's right. That's right. And tell us the year of your birth before proceeding.
Right. Yeah, you have to put your year, your birth in the comments before you can listen.
That's right. I think that's a reasonable verification, don't you?
That's crazy.
Well, thank you all for listening. I did want to mention really quickly, I mean, everyone knows it by now, but the tent city, I guess they were calling it, of migrants, they said it's not happening. And so a lot of people came out to rally against that yesterday. As of now, it's been announced. It's not a deal. Of course, we're going to keep an eye on that, but just an update. That was big news locally around here. So a lot of people were involved and very interested in that development.
Absolutely.
So as always, thank you for checking us out. We've got work to do, and we'll catch you next time.